Dear students, today we will have a discussion about William Shakespeare's drama As You Like It. We have had an earlier discussion about William Shakespeare and his contribution in English literature, especially in the history of drama. And now only we will have the single topic, one of his famous drama, As You Like It. Let's have the story. Orlando, the hero of the story, the youngest son of the new deceased Sir Roland de Boys, one of the trustworthy courtiers of the old Duke, complains to Adam, their old servant, the old family servant, that his eldest brother, Oliver, has kept his inheritance from him. That is, Oliver has neglected training Orlando to be a proper gentleman. Oliver arrives on the scene, and a bitter quarrel takes place. Adam parts the fighting brothers, and Oliver coldly promises to give Orlando his due. Learning that Orlando intends to challenge Duke Frederick's champion wrestler, a royal wrestler, a brute of a man called Charles, Oliver makes plans to have his brother killed in the ring. He convinces the slow-witted Charles, the royal wrestler, that Orlando is plotting against him and that Orlando should be killed. At the match the next day, Duke Frederick, his daughter Celia, and his niece Rosalind, the heroine of the story, watch Charles and Orlando at the ring. As soon as Celia and Rosalind finds the sleek boy very weak looking, Orlando, they try to convince Orlando their most not to fight against the royal wrestler. Charles has seriously injured his first three opponents, they also inform. But Orlando is determined, for he has lost all hopes about his own life, and now he thinks it is better to suicide than to continue his life, because his own brother Oliver doesn't care and has not arranged to make him a gentleman. But finally, when the wrestling starts, in the match, with Orlando, the young man's great speed and agility defeat the Duke's champion, the royal wrestler Charles. At first, Frederick is very cordial to Orlando, but when he learns the youth's identity, that he is the son of the old Duke's faithful courtier, Sir Roland de Boys, he becomes furious and leaves the place. The reason for the Duke's leaving is that Orlando's dead father, Sir Roland de Boys, had at one time been Frederick's bitter enemy. At the end of the wrestling match, Rosalind and Celia comes to Orlando, and love at first sight happens between Orlando and Rosalind. Rosalind, as a token of love, offers Orlando her gold chain. But now it is time to part, and Orlando returns her feelings, but he is so tongue-tied with embarrassment that in fact he can say nothing. At the ducal palace, we discover that Celia and her cousin Rosalind are as close as sisters. Rosalind is the daughter of the rightful Duke. Duke Senior, whose throne has been usurped by his brother, Duke Frederick. Duke Frederick has banished Duke Senior along with a band of his faithful followers to the forest of Arden to live the life of simple foresters. Until now, it is only the strong bond between Rosalind and Celia that prevents Duke Frederick from sending Rosalind away to share her father's exile. But suddenly, Frederick storms into the palace, accuses Rosalind of plotting against him, and despite Celia's pleas for her cousin, banishes Rosalind. After her father leaves, Celia decides to go into exile with her cousin, and the girls set out for the forest of Arden. Rosalind disguised as a young man, Ganymede, and Celia disguised as a young country lass, Aliena. Tarstone, Frederick's jester, accompanies them. Meanwhile, Orlando returns home and is warned by the faithful Adam that Oliver is plotting to kill him. Together, they two decide to set out for the forest of Arden, and Adam offers all his accumulation throughout his life to Orlando. And they now expect that they will find safety there in the forest of Arden. When his daughter Celia is missed, Frederick sends his men out to find Orlando the next day. When he is informed of Orlando's flight to the forest of Arden, Frederick assumes that Orlando is responsible for Celia's disappearance, and in a rage he sends for Oliver and commands him to find Orlando or else forfeit his entire estate to Duke Frederick. In the forest, on the other hand, Orlando and Adam join Rosalind's exiled father and his men, while Rosalind and Celia, still in disguise, purchase a little cottage and a small herd of sheep and settle down to a peaceful pastoral existence in the further side of the forest. One day, however, Rosalind finds that the trees in the forest are all covered with sheets of poetry, and those poetries are dedicated to her name, Rosalind. The author of these poems, of course, is Orlando. So, still pretending to be the young man, Ganymede, Rosalind meets Orlando, incidentally, who is in the throes of love sickness for having apparently lost Rosalind. Ganymede offers to cure Orlando of his love sickness by pretending to be his lady love, Rosalind. Orlando, she says, should woo Ganymede as though he were Rosalind. In turn, Ganymede will do his best to act as moody and capricious as a girl might just do, and eventually Orlando will weary of all the coy teasing and forget all about love. And Orlando agrees to try the plan. Rosalind, meanwhile, continues to assume the guise of Ganymede and becomes accidentally involved in yet another complication. Sylvius, a young shepherd, falls in love with Phoebe, a hard-hearted shepherdess. But Phoebe injects Sylvius's attention and falls in love with the young, good-looking Ganymede, and she thinks Ganymede to be a young shepherd boy. In the midst of all this confusion, Oliver arrives in the forest of Arden. He tells Ganymede of a near escape he has just had with death. His brother Orlando, he says, saved him from being poisoned by a deadly snake as he slept. And later, Orlando killed a lioness that was ready to pounce on Oliver. Oliver then tells Ganymede that he has been sent to this part of the forest, in fact, to seek out a young man known as Ganymede and tell him that Orlando cannot keep his appointment with him. And there is more news. While saving Oliver's life, Orlando was wounded. Hearing this, Ganymede swoons. Later, in another part of the forest, Oliver and Celia meet and fall in love at first sight. And the jester Taston falls in love with a homely, simple-minded young woman named Audrey, who tends a herd of goats. Taston chases off Audrey's suitor, a lout named William, and although he realizes that he will never instill in Audrey any understanding of or love for such things as poetry, he still feels that he must have her. Duke Frederick, meanwhile, is alarmed by the daily exodus of so many of the best men of his court to the alliance that is growing in the forest of Arden. He therefore decides to journey to the forest himself and put a stop to all this business. At the forest's edge, however, he meets an old religious hermit and is miraculously totally converted. At this point, Rosalind, still disguised as Ganymede, promises to solve the problems of everyone by magic. Shedding her male attire in private, she suddenly appears as herself, Rosalind, and the play comes to a swift close as she and Orlando, Oliver and Celia, Sylvius and Phoebe, and Tustin and Audrey are married in front of the band of the old Duke, Rosalind's father. The rightful Duke is joyous at finding his daughter again and is returned to his ducal status. Frederick's conversion is so complete that he renounces the world. At the end of the play, Rosalind comes forward and addresses the audience in a short but charming epilogue. In particular, she talks to all the lovers in the audience and wishes them well. That is the end of the story.